So here's our objectives, trying to satisfy the whole peanut industry, from the growers to the manufacturers to the consumers, shellers, and everybody. Here are 7 Georgia release varieties that most of you are familiar with. I won't spend a whole lot of time on that, and just mainly look at some of the highlights. Georgia-06G, most of you are familiar with it. It's a large seeded runner, good TSWV resistance, medium maturity similar to the older Georgia Green variety, good stability and productivity across many different environments, and has proven excellent for the runner market trade. Georgia Green is very similar to 6G, except it's a little smaller, has maybe a little bit better CBR resistance than Georgia 6G. Georgia 7W is similar to Georgia-06G and having a larger seed size, but also has TSWV and white mold resistance. Runner growth habit, medium maturity as well. 12Y, this is a high yielding, high TSWV, white mold resistant variety. Later maturing, I would definitely try to plant it early in April if you can. It's shown good performance and stability even under those conditions with even reduced input cost. Okay, talking about a few Howell lakes, all the ones up to now were non-Howell lake. Georgia-09B was our first Howell lake. It's a back cross to Georgia Green, first back cross, similar in maturity, very good productivity and stability, has the Howell lake, low linoleic fatty acid composition, which results in a lower total saturated fats and has excellent peanut flavor characteristic. 13M. Got a lot of interest early on with that, and maybe not so much this year after last year. It does have leaf spot susceptibility. It's a Howell lake, intermediate runner growth habit, has good vine growth, as some folks can attest to. Excellent TSWV resistance, and in our studies where we use a good fungicide program throughout the year, and I know most of you do, we haven't seen the leaf spot problem, but we're in a good rotation, 3-year rotation, and we try to plant early, and that makes a difference. So just a few points there, if you could. If you're interested in growing this one, you probably need to stay with good rotation and plant as early as possible. April is fine with this one as well. Georgia-14N is the last one I'll mention. This is Howell Lake, TSWV, and root knot nematode resistance. It has the high level root knot nematode resistance that Tifgard has, and Corley's new line. We're talking very high resistance. When I speak of TSWV resistance, it's a matter of percentage, less than, say, a susceptible line. Likewise with leaf spot or white mold or some of these other disease. With root knot nematode, those genes, which is 2, was integrated from the wilds, and it has an outstanding nematode resistance. So hopefully this one would work well in a heavy infected area of root knot nematode. Let's look at some of the results. This is 3 years, bring you up to date from 13, 14, and 15 averages. You can see TSWV percentage taken during mid-season. These 3, 13M, 12Y, 6G, very low percentage mid-season. And you can see Tough Runner 727 having the highest, and then back down in the scheme of things. Whoops. At the end of the year, I clumped everything together. Total disease. This is not only TSWV, but any white mold that may escape any kind of fungicide treatment. 12Y, lowest incidence. This is percentage again. 13M, 6G, and you can see them stepping on up. So that's the disease incidence beginning at mid-season, late season. This is the yield comparing these same varieties. You'll notice 12I coming out on top, followed by 13M and 6G, and then it drops with some of these others. Total sound mature kernel grade, TSMK percentage, 6G, 7W, 9B, 14N, and greener, all coming out on top as far as high grade percentage. Good variability now in seed size. We're looking at much smaller seed with a higher count per pound with 13M and M and 14N compared to, say, some of these other middle. And these are your large seeded runners. There's 6G, Florida 07, Tip Guard 7W, and Tough Runner 727, all large seeded. These are your more small seeded lines that you could cut some seed cost with. Bottom line, dollar value return per acre. These three came out on top, 3 years, many locations, 13M, 12I, and 6G. And with that, I'll close, and I don't know if we have time for questions.
Thank you also to the organizers for letting us speak today. I'll talk to you about the University of Florida varieties. This is a list of the varieties. Our latest releases are listed there: Tough Runner 511, Tough Runner 297, and the latest one is Flow Run 157. I'll show you some data on those. And of course, you know the previous releases: Florida 07, Flow Run 107, and Tough Runner 727. The Tough Runner 511 is a large seeded runner. It's in the category with Georgia 6G and Florida 07 in terms of its count per pound. We've been digging it 140 days in Florida under irrigation, so we consider it to be a medium maturity. Very good yield potential. It's been similar to 06G in Florida and Georgia. Grades are also very good and has quite good resistance to white mold. It is susceptible to leaf spot, similar to Georgia 09B, and moderately resistant to spotted wilt. This variety has performed quite well in many of the field tests we put it in, both yield and grade-wise. The 297 is similar to it. It's just a little bit larger seeded than the 511. Also been digging it at 140 days in Florida under irrigation. Excellent yield potential and grade potential, and similar disease profile, except that it has a little bit better spotted wilt resistance than the 511 does, and also very good resistance to white mold. The 157 was our latest release from last year, and it's a smaller seeded type. It's similar to Flow Run 107 in its seed size, medium maturity, yield potential is similar to Georgia 09B in Florida, has very good grades. It is susceptible to leaf spot, a little bit better resistance to leaf spot than is in the 511 and 297, and limited information on spotted wilt. We just haven't seen that disease enough to get a good handle on this particular variety, but it seems like it'll be okay for that disease. Looking at a little bit of data from the University of Florida test, this is averaged over 4 years and up to 4 locations. In this case, it's 3. But the higher yielding groups you can see here, there was a difference of 222 pounds per acre that would be statistically significant from the highest yielding variety, 297, and 297, Georgia 12Y and 06G were in that top group, followed very closely by 511 and 157. Looking at the University of Georgia trials over the last 2 years, similar, the 511 was in the top yielding group there with 12Y, 06G, 13M, down to 727. So some of those varieties doing quite well in the Georgia under irrigated and non-irrigated conditions as well. Looking a little bit at disease resistance, this is how we as a community rate the disease resistance using the Peanut RX program, and several states collaborate together to come up with these numbers that give us the relative resistance and really the risk of losses from disease for these different varieties. So I've highlighted those ones that are the best in each category, like the 10, 5, 10, and 15 for spotted wilt would be the very best in those categories. The 15 point would be the very best in the leaf spot category. And we have some quite good varieties for white mold resistance too in that category of 10 to 15 points. So I'd encourage you to look at those varieties that have those disease resistances. If you have some issues with any particular disease, these varieties will really help out in terms of your potential for production and reducing the risk of losses. And we also do disease tests in Florida that kind of that do correlate with those. So these varieties here, and this is a white mold test where we inoculate the plots with the pathogen. And if you know those hits in your field where you see the white mold start to run down the row, this is what that would look like on the whole plot. Those varieties that are more resistant, that have a 10 on the Peanut RX, like 12Y, this new one that's not rated yet, but it seems very similar to that, they would lose less yield. So this yellow bar is the inoculated, so 4,000 pounds per acre, even in the worst conditions, up to over 6,000 pounds per acre when they're not inoculated. Those varieties that are in the 10 to 15 point range in the Peanut RX tend to lose more yield, and those are in the 20 to 25 even more yield. So this shows you that even in those really hard-hit areas of the field, those more resistant varieties will lose less yield, therefore less risk of loss from those varieties in those more severe conditions. And that was the 2015 data showing a very similar trend. These varieties, 297, 511, and 727, in that sort of middle group with Tifgard and 06G on the kind of in between those. And the more resistant ones up here towards the top, the 12Y, this 15302 will likely be a release of ours this year. Leaf spot is similar to that. We look at those varieties that are more resistant to in a 0 spray, which is the red, a 4 spray, which is the orange there, and the blue is a 8 spray program. We see that the numbers line up quite nicely with the Peanut RX. Those varieties that are more resistant with lower points than the RX tend to lose less yield. Those in the middle group here, those are more susceptible down here. And with that, I will close.
I'd like to just briefly talk about 2 cultivars this morning. One of them is getting to be kind of a dated cultivar, Tifgard, which we released in '08. I think most of you are familiar with this variety. Picture's worth 1,000 words, so the next 2 pictures are from a study with Tim Brenneman, and it's no fungicide, Tifgard, a resistant variety, and 06G is susceptible. And then this slide is also from his study, and he calls this the Green Island effect. With these nematode-resistant cultivars, you can just stand on the edge of the field and pick out the nematode resistance plots. As Bill mentioned, this is near immunity to that pathogen, so if you have nematode problems and you don't want to use nematicides, then you need to plant one of these varieties. And if you do plant one of these varieties, you don't need to use nematicides. So as soon as we released that, the industry asked us, well, is it a high leg variety? And well, it's not a high leg variety. So we started a project to combine nematode resistance with the high leg characteristic. And so we have recently released TIF-NV High OL, which was resulted from a cross of Tifgard, which contributed the nematode resistance gene, and Florida 07, which contributed the genes for High Lake. We worked very closely with Dr. Peggy Ozias-Akins here in Tifton to use marker-assisted selection to develop this variety. This is an example of the kind of data that she gives us. This is a molecular marker for nematode resistance. These, we sample leaf tissue from these plants, and she takes the tissue and they extract the DNA and do the analysis and tell us that these plants are homozygous for susceptibility. In other words, they're susceptible and they will breed, all their progeny will be susceptible. These plants are homozygous for resistance, they're resistant, and all their progeny will be resistant. And these plants are still heterozygous, so their progeny will segregate for resistance and susceptibility. So of course we focus on these plants and discard all these plants. She gives the same analysis for the High Lake characteristic. These are 76 individual plants. The green lines, each line represents a plant. These are homozygous for High Lake. All their progeny will be High Lake. The red lines are homozygous for normal oleic. All their progeny will be normal oleic. And the blue lines are heterozygous, and their progeny will continue to segregate. Now this slide and the previous slide is just kind of a simplistic, it's real data, but it's very limited data. Last year, Peggy's lab analyzed 10,000 plants for us, so they provide us with a lot of very valuable data, actually on an Excel spreadsheet, which we can then use to be more effective and efficient in our conventional breeding program. So, based on that work, we developed TIF-NV High Oleic. It's high yield, nematode resistance, high oleic, excellent tomato spotted wilt resistance, moderate level of resistance to leaf spot. It is a medium maturity. It is a large seeded runner. This line has been in the Georgia and the Alabama variety trials the past 2 years, so if you want to refer to that for some data on how it performs without any nematode pressure, what I'm going to present you in the next 2 slides is how it presents in a situation where we have a lot of nematode pressure. This is a test, once again, with Dr. Tim Brenneman down in Attapulgos in a field that has severe nematode pressure. These are the 2014 results, and I'm simply presenting you the top lines in this test along with a susceptible check. You can see TIF-NV was the top yielder, at least as good as TIFGuard. We have other breeding lines that also have excellent resistance, and in comparison to the susceptible check, which is significantly lower than all these. We took the best of these and then put in new breeding lines in 2015, and here's the results. Once again, TIF-NV HIOL is up near the top. We have a couple other breeding lines. You know, breeding is an ongoing process, so we're looking for the replacement for TIF-NV HIOL already. Things that have other disease resistances, smaller seed size, better grade, better yield. So we've got some candidates up here. Other breeding lines, TIFGuard, Georgia 14N, also nematode resistance in comparison to susceptible check. Unfortunately, there is no seed available. There will be no seed available in 2016 for this variety. We are trying to increase that seed as rapidly as possible. This is a picture that was sent to me from the Peanut Winter Nursery right outside of Ponce, Puerto Rico, taken about maybe 10 days ago. We have an acre of TIF-NV HIOL down there, and we're going to harvest that and send all the seed to Ralph Johnson. My last slide, I'd like your help in conveying this message to your fellow farmers and your family and your children and everybody. There is some misperception out there, but marker-assisted selection does not equal GMO. This is just some genetic technology that conventional breeders can use to improve their effectiveness and their efficiency. I have no problems with GMOs, but as we all know, there's some baggage that goes along with GMOs, and we don't need to have that we don't need to carry that baggage if we don't need to, and we don't need to. Marker-assisted selection is not GMO.